Picture this. It's the evening of July 29, 2026. A localized fire breaks out at Egypt's Damietta Port, right there on the Mediterranean coast. Just a single fire, right? Well, in an instant, that one highly localized event sets off a massive butterfly effect, sending shockwaves across the entire global supply chain. So how exactly does one fire in one port manage to completely paralyze global shipping? Welcome to this explainer. Today we're taking a really deep dive into this incredible real-world intersection where cutting-edge maritime engineering, high-stakes geopolitics, and massive macroeconomic forces all suddenly collide. We're going to explore how one single event exposed the hidden fragilities of our modern world. Okay, let's just map out where we're going. We're taking a micro to macro zoom-out journey today. We're going to start with the spark at Damietta Port, look at the tech that stopped a total disaster, examine the geopolitical revenge map, explore the shipping shock, and wrap up with the fragility of regional energy grids. Starting with Section 1, a spark at Damietta Port, taking the micro view. Let's start right on the ground, the immediate events of that evening at the port facilities in Egypt. You know what's really fascinating here? The totally conflicting narratives about what actually sparked the fire. On one hand, you have the Egyptian government's swift media containment strategy. Their Minister of Petroleum rushed to the scene, and official statements basically reassured the markets, saying, hey, this was just a technical glitch, we contained it rapidly, zero casualties. But then, you look at international maritime security assessments, most notably from a British firm called Ambre, and they paint a starkly different picture. Their intelligence points to a suspected targeted drone strike on U.S.-owned infrastructure. Now, we aren't here to take sides on what caused it. We are just going to look at the undeniable physical reality of what happened next. What we do know is that an explosion struck a massive vessel called the Energos Winter. Now, this is a floating storage and regasification unit, or FSRU, and because it was actively unloading at the time, the fire spread rapidly to an adjacent liquid natural gas carrier, the gas log Salem. The resulting blaze was so intense, it forced an immediate partial shutdown of the entire Damietta LNG terminal, and both of these massive ships had to be evacuated and frantically towed out of the inner port zone. Moving to Section 2, the technology that prevented disaster, also known as the shield. Let's zoom out slightly. We have two massive, highly volatile gas ships on fire. So why didn't the entire port just blow up? To really grasp what was at stake, look at the sheer scale of these assets. These aren't just boats, they are absolute behemoths. The Energos Winter and the gas log Salem both weigh in at over 80,000 tons of dead weight. The Energos Winter alone was holding tens of thousands of cubic meters of highly flammable liquid natural gas. The pure financial value and the potential destructive power sitting side by side in that port was just staggering. Because here is the absolute nightmare scenario in maritime gas transport, a BLEVE. That stands for Boiling Liquid Expanding Vapor Explosion. Imagine the external heat from the fire causing the ultra-cooled liquid gas inside the hull to suddenly boil and expand. It ruptures the entire vessel, creating a catastrophic, deadly explosion. The fact that a BLEVE did not happen that night, it's an absolute engineering marvel. And this is exactly how that disaster was avoided. The Energos Winter is equipped with this incredibly advanced containment system, the GTT NO96 Super Plus membrane. Think about this for a second. Inside the ship, you have liquid natural gas sitting at a freezing minus 162 degrees Celsius. Outside, a literal 1,000-degree inferno is raging. And what is separating them? A layer of Invar alloy, a specialized nickel-steel metal that is just 0.7 millimeters thick, backed by reinforced polyurethane foam. 0.7 millimeters. This incredibly thin thermal shield literally stopped the raging fire outside from boiling the freezing liquid inside. But insulation was only half the defense here. The active safety systems are just as wild. As the fire broke out, the ships naturally started to drift apart. And that's when a system from Trelleborg, called the Emergency Shutdown, or ESD, kicked in, completely autonomously. Step 1. The moment the ships drifted just 5 meters apart, the ESD-1 system instantly halted the transfer pumps and slammed the distribution valve shut. Step 2. At 7 meters of drift, ESD-2 triggered a dry brake. It mechanically snapped the connecting hoses apart before they could tear and spew more fuel into the flames. It's like a giant autonomous reflex. In mere seconds, this tech choked the fire of its fuel source and saved the port. All right, on to Section 3, the revenge map and conflict expansion. Let's look at the chessboard. To really understand the context, we gotta step away from the ship mechanics. and look at the turbulent geopolitical chessboard of the Middle East. This strike at Damietta did not happen in a vacuum. Check out this 48-hour timeline of synchronized regional escalation. 48 hours prior, Iranian state TV broadcasts a revenge map of potential targets. 24 hours prior, joint U.S. and Saudi strikes hit popular mobilization forces in Iraq. 12 hours prior, Iranian ballistic missiles are intercepted over Jordan. And then 0 hour, the Damietta Port strike. This wasn't an isolated glitch. It shows a massive expansion of the conflict from the traditional hot zones of the Gulf and the Red Sea, spilling right up to the Mediterranean. Let's look a little closer at that Iranian state TV broadcast from 48 hours prior. It was framed as retaliation for a Ukrainian strike on an Iranian vessel in the Caspian Sea. And the broadcast explicitly named the Damietta LNG terminal. It chillingly highlighted its 5.2 million ton capacity, calling it a vital gateway for gas exports to Europe. So they literally previewed the exact location of the strike, signaling this incredibly calculated attempt to squeeze both U.S. infrastructure assets and European energy alternatives all at once. Which brings us to Section 4, Insurance and Cargo Shipping Shock, the shockwave. With that geopolitical stage set, let's zoom out to the macroeconomic shockwave. How does one fire in Egypt cripple global shipping networks? Well, $200 million. That staggering figure represents the upper limit for war risk buyback premiums. Following this incident, the major insurance groups, the P&I clubs that cover like 90% of the entire world's commercial fleet, abruptly canceled their standard war risk coverage for the Gulf and the surrounding waters. So if a shipping company wanted to keep sailing there, they had to buy back specialized coverage at absolutely exorbitant rates. It instantly made countless voyages totally unprofitable. And the market panic? It was immediate. Brent crude oil prices spiked 8%, blasting right past $90 a barrel. Goldman Sachs came out with a severe warning that just one single month of disruption in this region could cause Asian spot LNG prices to explode by 130%. Traffic through the vital Strait of Hormuz completely plummeted by 81% as at least 13 massive LNG tankers physically U-turned in the middle of the ocean to avoid the risk zones. And this brilliantly illustrates where it actually hits your wallet. The world's biggest shipping alliances completely halted new bookings for the Middle East, and then they slapped massive emergency surcharges on everyday cargo. We're talking carriers like Hapag-Lloyd, CMA CGM, and MSC, adding anywhere from $3,500 to $4,000 in extra fees per standard 40-foot container. This was a knee-jerk financial penalty on the entire global supply chain, which heavily inflated the cost of moving standard goods across the world. Finally, Section 5, Fragility of Regional Energy Grids, the web. Let's pull all these threads together by looking at the fragile, interconnected web of energy that left Egypt specifically so vulnerable to this exact disruption. You really have to look at Egypt's rapid energy shift to get it. In the past, Egypt was this proud, independent exporter of natural gas, but because of intense demographic pressures and declining output from their local gas fields, their present reality is drastically different. Today, Egypt is a desperate emergency importer. Just to keep the lights on and stop nationwide blackouts, Cairo has been forced to tender for 160 spot LNG cargoes through to 2028. Now, because they're importing so much liquid gas, they need a way to turn it back into usable vapor for the power plants. So Egypt went out and rented a fleet of FSRUs. You can see this network spread across Sakna, Aqaba, and Damietta. And notice the Energos Winter right there on the list. That isn't just a random ship. It is a critical node in Egypt's emergency grid, and they lease it for about $3 million a month. Taking that single ship offline immediately threatens the stability of the entire national power grid. And the corporate side adds a whole other layer of fragility to this. The Energos Winter is tied to a company called New Fortress Energy. Before this fire even happened, NFE was already in deep financial trouble. They'd reported a net loss of $197 million in the first quarter of 2025, and they were forced into a massive $1.1 billion asset sale just to manage their debt. For a company relying on these long-term Egyptian leases as a literal financial lifeline, the destruction or serious damage to the Energos Winter is an absolute corporate disaster. Which finally brings us to this massive number, $35 billion. That represents the decade-long gas interdependence deal between Israel and Egypt. This huge strategic alliance relies on pipelines feeding Israeli gas into Egypt's network. It is a highly asymmetrical relationship where Egypt desperately needs that gas to avoid rolling blackouts. By targeting a key port where imported gas is processed, The attackers didn't just hit a boat. They put immense pressure on this entire $35 billion geopolitical web, involving Egypt, Israel, U.S. companies, and European buyers. So we've zoomed all the way out. We started by seeing how 0.7 millimeters of metal managed to save a physical port, but we also saw how it couldn't stop the resulting geopolitical and economic shockwaves from ripping across the globe. It leaves us with a terrifying new reality to ponder. What happens to the global economy when our critical energy choke points are no longer just fixed geographic locations, like the Strait of Hormuz, but rather individual, highly vulnerable, $3 million rented ships floating on the coast? It is an incredibly delicate web we've built, and as we've just seen, all it takes is a single spark to rattle the world.